Hello, my name's Tim Shoebridge. I'm very pleased to finally announce, actually, after a very long time, a new user oscillator for the family of Korg synthesizers that implement their multi-engine technology. I'm talking about the Korg Prologue, the Korg Minilogue XD, and the Korg NTS-1. Now, before we get into the new user oscillator, please indulge me. Let's just go back briefly 35 years, back to the middle of the 1980s. Doesn't that sound lovely? It really does to me. And I've wondered for a very long time, would it be possible Could it be possible for me to take just one or two of those waveforms and recreate them, emulate them if you will, inside this little synth here, the Minilogue XD? And that's what this new user oscillator is, and I'll show you now how to use it and what it sounds like. Okay, so as always, let's start with an initialized patch. Let's switch to the user oscillator. Choose my user oscillator from the list. DW, the digital waveform, although I have to say that the W looks suspiciously like an upside down A, but never mind. Now we need to hear it, so let's turn up the multi-engine volume and turn down both VCOs. There we go. So let's just add a little tiny bit of reverb. Just to make it more bearable. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is dive into the menu. So inside this user oscillator is actually two digital oscillators, two digital waveform generators basically. And you can choose the waveform that each one plays individually. So we do that in the menu. Let's go to Program, Edit, then this button here, and the first menu option we have is to choose the waveform for the first digital oscillator, waveform number 1. So if I play a note, you'll see there that I've managed to cram all 16 of the DW8000's waveforms in here. Well, not its waveforms, my recreations of those waveforms. So that's digital oscillator number 1. And then we have digital oscillator number 2, wave 2. But we don't hear anything because the way that you blend or sort of mix the waveform 1 and the waveform 2 is with the shape control, and by default for an initialized patch it's all the way over to the left, value 0. All the way over to the left is going to be waveform number 1, all the way over to the right is waveform number 2, and then we've got a blend in between them. So let me change the waveform number 2 to be something completely different, and let's blend. So that's waveform number 2. And that's waveform number 1. So just like on the DW8000, you can detune those two digital oscillators to give your sounds some lovely fatness, and that's what I've implemented in this user oscillator, and that's the next menu option. So here is a detune amount, and it's going to, the way I've implemented it, it's going to basically shift up in tune one of the oscillators and the other one is going to be shifted down, but only while they are blended together. So if I were to turn this shape control somewhere in the middle, we'll hear the effect at its most. So I'll play a note and apply the detune. All the way up to something quite nasty. But as I move this shape control to either of the extremes, you'll hear that the detune disappears. Because it's only present when there are blended waveforms together. At either end of that sort of extremes of blending, I turn the detune off. And the reason I do that is so that if you have quite dramatic detune, like here we have 100%, then when you hear one waveform dominantly or on its own, it won't sound out of tune compared to what the tuning of the synth is. Obviously that's quite a dramatic example, but that's the detune. Now also on the DW8000 with the second digital oscillator, you've got the ability to change its pitch to basically play things like fifths, for example, and it's called the interval, and that's what we've got with our next menu option, interval. So this is affecting digital oscillator number 2 only, so you need to make sure that you've blended it so that you can actually hear it. And as I turn this up, you'll hear it goes up in semitones all the way up to 1 octave above. And this is independent from the detune that's going on. Now on the DW8000 you've got the ability to set the octave range of each of the digital oscillators independently, and I've given you that here as well. On the DW8000 you have a choice of 16 feet, 8 feet or 4 feet. Here we can't have those kinds of wonderful menu options, we just have numbers. So on the next menu option, this is for digital oscillator number 1, we have got an octave setting, and it's either 1, 2 or 3. 1 means 16 feet, 2 means 8 feet, and 3 means 4 feet. So while we've got this thing blended here, let me play a note. So that's digital oscillator number 1, and then we have the same for digital oscillator number 2. So those are all the sort of like the basic digital oscillator manipulation options that you have. Compared to the DW8000, it's pretty comparable. There's one extra control that you've got here, which is to add some noise, because the DW8000 does have a noise source as well. So we've run out of parameters here. We've only got 6 parameters, and they are wave 1, wave 2, detune, interval, octave 1 and octave 2. So we've used up all of our 6. So there's one other way that we can apply a parameter, and that is with the shift control and turning the shape. So if I hold down a note, press the shift control, and then I turn the shape, it's giving us some noise blended in as well. So that's enough of the theory and the menu options and the controls and parameters. I'll play you now just a few examples of the kinds of patches that I've put together using this user oscillator. And what I've been doing is trying to replicate similar patches that are on the DW8000. Now I will supply these patches that I've made with the user oscillator. The user oscillator will be there for Prologue, Minilogue XD and NTS-1, but if you are a lucky Minilogue XD owner, then you'll get my presets a part of the deal. So there are a few examples of the kinds of sounds that I've been making with this user oscillator, trying to replicate some of the patches that I have on my DW8000. But it's not just about replicating the DW8000, it's really about going beyond it. In none of those patches was I playing the two VCOs on board the Minilogue XD, and I also wasn't modulating the shape control. Now if you modulate the shape control, you'll get kind of wavetable transition effects between one waveform and another waveform. So there's plenty of possibilities there if you want to take them. And I just want to say one thing about the quality of the sounds in this user oscillator. Some of the waveforms are very, very complex, and what I find is that when you play them at higher registers, there will be a lot of artifacts there, unfortunately. They sound better in the mid-range and the lower range rather than the high range. But other than that, there are two fundamental reasons why the sound of this user oscillator in a Prologue or a Minilogue XD for that matter will not match a DW8000 exactly. The first reason is that I've had to make some compromises in getting these 16 waveforms inside a user oscillator. There's so little memory for me to play with that I had to squeeze these 16 waveforms inside it, and the resolution of those waveforms is not as high as I'd like it to be. The second reason is the analog circuitry in a Prologue or a Minilogue XD. It's not the same as a DW8000 at all. The filters and the amplifiers, they're just not the same. You know, when I'm trying to replicate a patch on a Minilogue XD versus the DW8000, it's very clear to me what the differences are in the sound. The DW8000 has got a weight to it, yet it's got a clarity to it. It's just got something that's just really wonderful and amazing sounding, and in comparison a Minilogue XD is going to sound a bit muddy, and unfortunately there's nothing that I can do about that. I think it's just a fact of life with a lot of modern day analog synthesizers. They just don't have the same character of the synths that were being created in the 80s. But that said, I really do hope you enjoy this user oscillator. There's an awful lot of sound capability that you can get out of it. I really do hope it inspires you to make some wonderful sounds and some wonderful music. Until the next time, as always, thank you very, very much for watching.